Protests have been held in London over the introduction of digital identification. The ID will be needed in order to live and work in the UK.
Breaking news, the man who once prosecuted criminals now wants to monitor 67 million citizens. Keir Starmer, former head of the Crown Prosecution Service, has announced a £2 billion plan to introduce digital ID cards across Britain. Every job, every bank account, every benefit claim will be tied to one central database. He calls it security and efficiency. But privacy groups warn it's the largest mass data collection in UK history, capable of tracking citizens from the hospital to the voting booth. For Starmer, control means safety. For millions of Britons, it means the end of freedom itself. If you believe the public has a right to know what's really happening behind this digital revolution, hit subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. Keir Starmer calls it a system built on trust, but everything about it screams control. The digital ID bill promises privacy, yet forces citizens to upload passports, biometric photos and work records into a single government database. It claims to protect you, but gives the state power to suspend access to vital services if your data doesn't match. Officials insist it's voluntary, yet leaked drafts show it will soon become mandatory for work, healthcare and benefits. Even Britain's cybersecurity agency warns the £2 billion platform could become a goldmine for hackers. Across Southeast Asia, fraud syndicates in Cambodia are hijacking Western identity systems to steal money and blackmail victims. Experts fear a single breach in Starmer's database could expose millions of Britons overnight. As one MI6 officer warned, you can change your password but not your face or fingerprints. Starmer says it's about safety. But when the keys to every citizen's life are stored on one server, what happens when those keys fall into the wrong hands? Once a prosecutor sworn to uphold the law, Keir Starmer now seems determined to control the people beneath it. He says his digital ID plan will protect Britain. Under his vision, every citizen becomes a data point, every misstep, every delay, every unpaid bill logged, ranked, analysed. Police trials of facial recognition linked to the ID database are already underway, quietly expanding the state's eyes to every street corner. The irony? The man who once prosecuted surveillance abuses now writes the laws that make them legal. And if this bill passes, Britain will no longer need walls or bars, because its prison will be digital and its inmates will never even know they're locked inside. The backlash was immediate and global. Across Europe and North America, headlines erupted. Britain abandons liberty for control. Digital IDs or digital chain, but not everyone condemned it. In Beijing, China's state media praised Starmer's plan as a visionary step toward national stability. Commentators compared it to China's own social credit system, calling it proof that Western democracy finally understands control was its strength. While Western leaders called it a betrayal, Chinese officials called it progress. The United Kingdom, its cradle of modern democracy, was now being celebrated by authoritarian states for adopting their methods. And for millions of Britons watching this unfold, one question cut through the noise. If China sees this as a victory for control, what exactly has Britain lost? When the bill reached Parliament, protests erupted across Britain. From Manchester to London, tens of thousands filled the streets holding signs that read, "I am not a barcode." Retirees marched beside students, union workers beside tech engineers, all bound by one fear: being reduced to data. Videos flooded social media showing police scanning protesters with facial recognition cameras, triggering outrage online. Even mainstream anchors began to ask, has Britain traded its freedom for a false sense of security? Petitions demanding repeal surpassed 1.3 million signatures in 48 hours. But the louder the people shouted, the quieter the government became. Downing Street refused interviews, ministers dodged questions, and state-run outlets labelled protesters as digital anarchists. For the first time in decades, the phrase British democracy started sounding like a memory, not a reality. Starmer saw the backlash not as dissent, but as disorder. Behind closed doors, he ordered an emergency task force to monitor online misinformation. But leaked memos revealed the truth. A state-run censorship unit filtering social media posts critical of the policy. Accounts of journalists and activists vanished. Within days, reports disappeared from major outlets, replaced by headlines praising technological progress. Officials framed protests as foreign interference, hinting at Russian bots without evidence. Inside Parliament, Starmer defended his policy with chilling words: "Freedom without order is chaos, and I will not let chaos rule this country." Applause echoed through Labour benches, while outside millions watched in disbelief. The man who once promised transparency now ruled behind firewalls, and the more he spoke of safety, the more unsafe Britain became. Not from enemies abroad, but from power within. By mid-year, the nation had split in two. Half believed the digital ID was the price of progress. The other half called it the death certificate of democracy. Families argued at dinner tables. Universities banned debates to avoid riots. Corporations demanded proof of digital identity for jobs, loans, even subscriptions. Those who refused were flagged as non-compliant citizens. Panic erupted when leaks showed employers accessing private medical histories through the ID database, something the government swore would never happen. Starmer's approval ratings plunged below 30%, the lowest for any UK leader on record. Yet his cabinet doubled down, funding new data policing units. Britain's democracy had become a bureaucratic machine that punished disobedience. In a nation that once fought for freedom, people now feared to speak online. The line between citizen and suspect had vanished, replaced by a glowing blue icon on every phone. The world was watching and reacting fast. The European Union froze data sharing programs with the UK. The United States called for an inquiry. Authoritarian governments, meanwhile, offered technical assistance. China praised the system. Russia mocked it. Protests erupted at British embassies abroad as expats shouted, "Starmer's Britain isn't the Britain we left." Human rights groups petitioned the UN, arguing the programme violated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Markets tumbled, the pound hit a 5-year low, and investors fled London's tech sector. Inside Downing Street, officials dismissed the panic as temporary turbulence. But around the world, one truth spread faster than Starmer's defences. Britain, once a beacon of liberty, had become a global warning sign. Then came the night that changed everything. Anonymous hackers released 2.7 terabytes of government ID data, bank records, health files, personal details of 40 million Britons. The dark web exploded with stolen identities for sale. Hospitals froze, banks shut down, airports ground to a halt. Starmer appeared live, pale and shaken, declaring a national cyber emergency. But it was too late. Opposition leaders demanded his resignation. Crowds surrounded Downing Street chanting, "No ID, no control," as riot police held the line. Even Labour MPs whispered that the project was doomed. The government had promised safety and delivered chaos. The network built to protect Britain had just exposed it to the world. And as dawn rose over Westminster, the illusion of order crumbled, leaving only fear, anger, and one haunting question: who really controls Britain now? When the dust settled, Britain wasn't safer. It was silent. The servers were rebuilt, the networks restored. But something far greater had been lost: trust. A government that promised protection had stripped its people of privacy. A leader who once fought for justice had turned surveillance into law. And a nation that once stood for liberty had locked itself inside a digital cage. In the end, control didn't save Britain. It broke it. History will remember this, not as a triumph of technology, but as the day freedom blinked and never opened its eyes again. If you believe power should serve people, not control them, hit subscribe, because the next story could decide whether Britain ever wakes up from this digital nightmare. Civil rights groups from Washington to Berlin accuse Starmer of betraying the very values the West once exported to the world. Freedom, privacy, individuality, and even allies inside NATO warn that turning citizens into data subjects risks creating a government that knows too much, too fast, and too easily.